Before we get started with this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out, I think it's time we all say thank you to everyone watching, because thanks to you subscribing, we have now reached the 10,000 subscriber mark. Big time for celebration. So we're really happy about that. This was something we were looking forward to reaching, and we could not have reached that mark if it weren't for you clicking that big red button. And we hope you still do if you are still somehow on the fence on subscribing to the show. I mean, you get great content watching this show. You get to hear me, you get to hear Stu, you get to hear Rick, you get to hear Jess, and you get to hear us talk about the Montreal Canadiens still in the playoffs, which we'll get to on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Julian McKenzie, I'm your host for Hockey Inside Out, alongside the usual suspects, Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, and Rick Green, former Montreal Canadiens defenseman, Stanley Cup champion, and assistant coach as well. The list is long for Rick Green's accomplishments. Let's talk about this playoff series, which is still ongoing, and the main attraction for the Montreal Canadiens and the Vegas Golden Knights, the referees. Yep, that's exactly what I intended to have happen, to watch the Montreal Canadiens, the team I have grown up watching and covering for a good chunk of my life, to be in the playoffs so close to the final. And the thing we have to talk about is the officiating. So much so, I looked forward to hearing the announcement of who was going to referee Game 5. I don't mean to be rude and pull out my phone and try to remember who actually was announced for the referees. Kelly Sutherland and Eric Furlack. I don't normally care about the referees like this, but the officiating has been so bad during the playoffs that we have to care about. Before I start to lose my mind over this, please talk about the officiating in Games 3 and 4 in this series.
Well, listen, it hasn't changed from the regular season. It's just highlighted obviously more because of the importance of the games. The refereeing has been terrible. We all know it. They've missed calls. They've missed, blatant infractions that by the rule book is supposed to be called. And for whatever reason, these guys just look the other way and continue to let these things go. And I can understand, yes, playoffs is big time, aggression, and the guys are fired up. You find that line between letting some stuff go and then making the calls. And they've just gone the other extreme and just letting the game get out of hand. But the unfortunate part is this should not be the topic of conversation as you get into the semifinal of the playoffs. I hope that, the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, and from what I'm hearing, is they're trying to put these guys on the back burner and concentrate on the job at hand. And the referees, you don't know what you're going to get, but the bottom line is, try and put your best game out there, have the puck more than the opposition, and maybe the opposition will be forced to take penalties that will, work in their favor. But right now it's not happening. Can't do anything about it. You just have to move forward.
It's sad that the NHL has allowed its incompetent officiating to become the main storyline in the playoffs. I mean, we're talking about it. It's what everybody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about the actual games on the ice. They're talking about how incompetent the officials are. As I wrote in a column, if Chris Lee and Dan O'Rourke referee another game in this playoff series, in any playoff series, that's a joke. I mean, that's the most incompetent officiating I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot. It's one thing to let go of the little minor hook or maybe the little minor hold, but a slash to the face of Corey Perry, Shea Weber getting drilled from behind into the boards, Joel Edmondson doing the same to a Vegas player from behind, drilling him into the boards, no penalty calls. Like, really? Seriously? Like, somebody's going to end up getting hurt, for one, and it just makes the game a joke. Like, people who maybe don't follow hockey and are tuning in to watch this, so they're like, what's going on here? And as Kevin Bieksa said on the Hockey Night in Canada Intermission, it's prison rules. Well, it's embarrassing. That's like the NHL. Is that what you want to lower yourself to, where guys just basically go out and try and kill each other? You don't blow any whistles or anything. Just call the rules. Okay, maybe you're going to let the little minor hook or whatever go slide in the playoffs. But when somebody takes a high stick in the face and gets up with blood all over his face, and you look right at the guy and don't call a penalty, when Nick Suzuki gets punched right in the face with the referee standing a foot away, and you don't call a penalty, it brings up a whole other thing. I mean, people are talking now about, does the NHL not want the Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final because there's going to be only 3,500 fans at the Bell Center, whereas in Vegas or Tampa, there's going to be a full house. And I hate to go down that road, But you honestly, when the refereeing is this bad and so many calls are missed against one team, you start to wonder. And that's a bad situation for the NHL to be in, when fans are starting to wonder if the referees are trying to influence the outcome of the game. And again, it's just sad that they've allowed this incompetent officiating to become the main storyline in the playoffs. Because the game, hockey's such a great game. Just call the rules. That's all. Call the rules. If it's a penalty, it's a penalty, and just call it.
Well, I think that's what everyone is wondering. What's a penalty? You know, that they let some things go, they let some other things not go. So everyone's questioning the rules of this game, and that's people who watch hockey regularly for it. But I think one of the big things to fix the problem with the officiating is, we've spoken about this before, make one of them available after the game to speak to the media, especially when there's a game where there's so many blown calls, to give an explanation as to why you did not think Corey Perry needing to get 7 stitches to fix his nose again was not a penalty, to try and give an explanation. And by not doing that, anything kind of goes. And as you mentioned, Stu, it's a really bad look for the NHL. It looks like such a Bush League sports league. And I don't necessarily think any other of the professional sports leagues in North America would put up with something like this.
And if a player or a coach does speak out, they get fined. I mean, Corey Perry was asked after the game, the other night, he says, I can't say anything. And Brendan Gallagher had a good answer. He basically said, well, just, you've been watching the games. Like, you can see what's happening. I don't need to say anything. And that said a lot. And good for Brendan Gallagher. He made that comment. They can't fine him for it. And he basically, what you see is what's happening. And, in the NFL, in the Super Bowl, they don't stop calling pass interference and let the defensive back mug the receiver. In the NBA, they call penalty fouls all the time. Like 3 seconds left, or last second shot, they'll call a foul on it. A foul is a foul. And again, hockey's a different sport. It's quick, and you let, as I mentioned earlier, maybe let some of the little minor hooks and whatever go, but outrageous penalties. Like it's a sad look for the NHL. It makes you wonder: are they not confident in just selling the product with the rules? Like, why did the rule book get thrown out in the playoffs? I find a hard time understanding that.
I used to enjoy the playoff time because they did let a lot of stuff go. But now you're into a situation where a guy gets his face ripped open, with a high stick, and another call with a complete punch right to the head. It's not sending the right type of information to how the game is supposed to be refereed. And I just hope that, and I'm quite sure that they've addressed it. Whether or not they're going to do anything about it, we will see. But I think it's quite obvious that the things that have been going on in the game are way too extreme, and they're going to have to send a message saying, "Listen, we'll let you guys play. We'll let you guys get away with some things, but we're going to have to clamp down, obviously, on the extreme situations where guys could possibly get hurt, and guys are cut open bleeding." So hopefully we'll see some results sooner than later.
I'd be surprised if anything changes. I mean, Gary Bettman never admit he's wrong. I think he's going to double down. I think they'll double down and just keep letting everything going down. Like I don't think they're going to change anything. I think this is the way the NHL wants the games to be called in the playoffs, and it's hard to understand. They say they don't want the referees to decide the outcome, but the referees do decide the outcome. You have a player like Cole Caulfield with all his speed and talent. If you're allowed to mug him, cross-check him, hit him from behind into the boards, you take him out of the game. Is that what the NHL wants? They want their star players taken out of the game in the playoffs so that other guys can run around and cross-check them and run them from behind into the boards? To me, it doesn't make sense. In Gary Bettman's world, somehow it does.
Do we all feel better after, letting that all out just now? Because I feel as if pretty much everyone here brought up a point that I would have made anyway, and I know I'd like to jump in on some of these points, but I figured, what? I think you all got it. You guys are good. I think we all let that one out. I think we all understand the officiating has been below standard to this point, and the expectation, or the hope at least, is that at least for the rest of the series and the rest of the playoffs, it could get a little better. But I am on the side of Stu Cowan in that I'm a bit apathetic and just thinking this probably might not even change. So we're just going to have to get used to the fact that the referees are just going to call it like they see it, which in the case of, Nick Suzuki getting punched in the face by Brayden McNabb, just seeing it and just not calling it at all. But anyway, let me go to question number 2 before I say something to get myself in trouble, which actually...
I don't think Gary can find you, though, Julian. You're okay.
Look, I don't know. I don't want any email from the NHL or somebody going at me saying I said something flagrant. Let's go to another I guess, controversy that kind of arose just before Game 4, which I also thought was a bit weird. It pertains to the choice of goaltender that the Vegas Golden Knights ended up using. We all remember what happened to Marc-Andre Fleury after Game 3 with the gaffe that led to the first of 2 goals for Josh Anderson. They go to Robin Lehner, who, as he told in his post-game conference after Game 4, he actually went to the arena and saw all the comments of people talking him, and he probably thrived off that, and it worked for the Golden Knights because they ended up winning Game 4, and the series is now tied at 2. What did you guys think of the Vegas Golden Knights making this goaltending change, and do you think that it really had that much of an impact on the game and possibly in the series?
Well, Rick can vouch for this for me, I'm sure, since he's been a coach in the NHL behind the bench, but nobody knows their team or their players better than the coaching staff of that team. And, Peter DeBoer said the goalie change had put Robin Lehner and it had nothing to do with Marc-Andre Fleury's gaffe at the end of Game 3. I don't really believe that. He said it was about fatigue, but he's in a good situation where he's got 2 sort of number 1 goalies. I mean, these guys have been fighting each other for the number 1 job for the last couple of seasons. And he obviously had confidence in Lehner putting him in. He probably thought it might give his team a little bit of a spark after that downer from the previous game, when Fleury let in that bad goal near the end and then they lost in overtime. And it was a courageous, gutsy move by him to do it. If it went bad, everybody would be ripping him, but it went right. And Lehner was the difference in that game. The Canadiens came out, they were flying. They were all over in the first period. He kept the score 0-0. When they were up 1-0, Cole Caulfield had that breakaway, and he made a really good move trying to go 5-hole on him. Not many goalies stopped that. Lehner did, and that ended up being a turning point. So the board knows his team. He knows his 2 goalies. He obviously had confidence in the move he made. Kudos for him for doing it. And it was a key point in that game. Robin Lehner was the best player in that game. He was the difference, and he's the reason why Vegas won it and tied up the series.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this move because they were only down 1 game. It wasn't like they were, blowing, they were down by 2 at this point and it was starting to get a little bit desperate. But I was like, is this some sort of gamesmanship that's happening at the Vegas Golden Knights morning skate, having Robin Lehner come off the ice first, which is usually the indication of the starting goaltender, and then deciding to go with him? Because the last time he went with him in the playoffs was the previous series against Colorado, and he let in 7 goals. So it's not like he was coming off a good playoff performance, and it was a risky move to make at this point at the playoffs, but it worked out well, and it clearly lit something under Robin Lehner. As you mentioned, he showed up at the Bell Center early by himself, looked at Twitter, thanked everyone for all these negative comments, and really kind of focused at the Vegas Golden Knights fan base, saying, all the hate that he's getting from his own fans, and he's happy that he proved them wrong. Worked out well for him. I don't necessarily know if that works well for every other athlete out there. But it was a move that paid off, and that one little shakeup was able to give the Vegas Golden Knights the win in that game.
I was really surprised they went with Lehner because Fleury, he's won 9 times in the playoffs. He's shown in previous games that if he comes out with a bad goal, he's able to rally and get his best game forward the next game. But hey, listen, big time gamble. It worked out. Lehner stepped in there, made some critical saves. And, he rolled the dice on that one. And I personally thought that they would have probably started Fleury. And, if he looked uncomfortable, again, easier said than done, maybe they would have given him the yank then. But, hey, it's a tough decision. And the bottom line is when you win, everything is good. And obviously that was what they did. And, watch out for the next game.
I don't know if DeBoer is a gambler or not. Maybe he turned into one in Vegas, but it was a gamble. He rolled the dice, as Rick said, and it turned out well for him and could be a turning point in the series. I'll
just add this. I was very surprised to see that Marc-Andre Fleury would not be in net for Game 4, and I tried not to buy into any of the gamesmanship stuff ahead of that game because I just think with the routines for goaltenders or pretty much any player, especially in crucial games like this, like you don't really want to mess with any of that heading into an important playoff game. But I look at the Golden Knights right now, tied in this series with the Montreal Canadiens here, which, look, I think the Canadiens deserve an immense amount of credit for pushing this team to this point. I think if you talk to a lot of Canadiens fans at the beginning of this series and you say, okay, at one point in the series it's going to be tied at 2-2, a lot of them would take it. If you tell them that the Golden Knights are tied at 2-2 in this series with the Canadiens and only 2 of their forwards have actually scored goals in this series, they'd be very excited. I think the Fleury-Leonard goaltending, quote-unquote, controversy, that's the least of the Golden Knights' problems right now. The Canadiens deserve a lot of credit for, basically shutting down a lot of the Golden Knights forwards. The misfit line of Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault and William Karlsson hasn't been effective. I think Max Pacioretty only has like 2 assists to this point in the series. Mark Stone, even though he can still do other things on the ice, he hasn't necessarily been lighting up the lamp for the Golden Knights here. The Canadiens deserve a lot of credit for how they've been shutting down the forwards and essentially having Vegas rely on their defensemen to put up points. And I think the Leonard Fleury thing was just a lot of added noise. The goaltending should not be the issue when it comes to this team. It worked out for Robin Lehner in overtime. Who knows how it would have worked out if the Montreal Canadiens ended up winning that game in overtime and the Golden Knights were down 3-1 headed home. But I thought it just created a lot of extra noise for no reason. I think Fleury, despite the gaffe in Game 3, should have started in Game 4. But look at me. I'm just a YouTube guy, and I'm not coaching in the Stanley Cup semifinals. So, hey.
Well, I was just going to say, Brendan Gallagher brought up a point. He said the pressure's all on Vegas. It's not on them right now. And I think that's a perfect situation for the Canadiens to be in and keep pushing this storyline that it's Vegas who has their back against the wall, and the Habs are just happy to be there, kind of.
Yeah, that Game 4 win, though, was huge for Vegas, because I think if they lose that, I know the Canadiens came back from down 3-1. But it's hard to imagine Vegas coming back the way the Canadiens have been able, as you said, Julian, shut down their forwards. And they did it against Winnipeg. They did it against Toronto, too. This isn't just a one-off thing. The Canadiens have, with that system they've been playing, they've really been able to limit the other team's top forwards right through the playoffs, or at least since Game 5 against the Leafs. So that was, I figured whoever won that overtime game might win the series. And Vegas has momentum now. There's no doubt about that.
And you got to compliment Leonard, who didn't play in over 6 weeks, and, you throw him into the fire like that. And man, oh man, there's a lot of pressure on you as a goaltender to make it happen. And you got to give the guy full marks for, coming in somewhat cold and doing what he did. And, he's a special guy, obviously, to be able to handle that. And you have to, like I said, you have to compliment him on doing a good job. And DeBoer looks like a magician by pulling that rabbit out of his hat, because it worked.
And Leonard's he's obviously strong mentally to sit and read negative stuff about you, get yourself fired up. And after letting in 7 goals, the only other game played in Game 1 there against Colorado. I mean, good for him. Good for him. He answered the call.
Yeah, I have to give Robin Lehner some props for that. I mean, the times I read the negative comments on this show after one, I'm rattled for a little bit. For Robin Lehner to go through all that before playing a playoff game, it just goes to show why he is where he is right now in the NHL. Another story that's popped up in this series is the status of Dominique Ducharme, who tested positive for COVID-19, and now he is in isolation. And as a result, we're probably not going to see him for the rest of this series. In his place, Luke Richardson stepping up and taking over the interim head coaching duties for the Montreal Canadiens. How do you think Dominique Ducharme's absence affects the team, and what impact do you think Luke Richardson has on this team?
That's a long title to have as interim
head coach.
It really is an unfortunate situation for Dominique Ducharme, especially because, he has no symptoms. He hasn't spread it to anyone else on the team. He is double vaccinated, but it hasn't been a full 3 weeks, which they say can take to be in the effect. But hey, the good news about this is that it shows that these vaccines are working. But the next person in line, Luke Richardson, I think is the perfect person to take over as a head coach of this team. He's been a head coach in the AHL before. He's a coach that is very well liked among the players on the team and also around the league as well. He's always been someone who's been in a leadership type of position. He knows how to motivate guys. He knows the game very well. I would not be surprised if somewhere down the line if he does get a head coaching job in the NHL. So when you're in a situation like this, that is not ideal. The positive part of it is that you have a guy like Luke Richardson who's able to step in and take over the bench and fill in while Dominique Ducharme has to be away from the team.
I really feel bad for Dominic. Firstly, not being able to finish kind of what he started. He's a hands-on, obviously, guy, and he's seen some of the results of his hard work. And unfortunately, he's got to do everything from a distance, and it's quite painful for him. But Luke has stepped in there. The X's and O's, I think, are all in place. They obviously know what they need to do and not do, and now it's about execution and showing what they've been showing before, which is that determination and desperation. And it's really nice to see that the guys are as tight as they are right now, and they'll do whatever they can do, no matter who's behind the bench. But they have a really good chemistry and a good group, and I think the relationship, unfortunately, is not exactly what they had hoped for, but Luke is doing a great job, and hopefully he'll continue to have some success back there.
Yeah, and Ducharme, what must make it really extra frustrating for him is, when he did the Zoom conference with us the other day, he said he's feeling fine. It's not like he's at home feeling sick and he can't take part. He says he's had no symptoms. He feels fine. He wishes he could be with the team. He can't, of course, because of Zoom. He can still communicate with the players. He can still communicate with the coaching staff, so he's not totally shut out. But with Luke Richardson, there's a reason why basically all the coaches were fired this year except Luke Richardson. And Ben Schrott spoke about it earlier this week when he said, the guys in this team would skate through a wall for Luke Richardson. He's a player's coach. He's a guy who played 21 years in the NHL. And when you listen to him talk in his Zoom conference, he's so calm and cool. If you watch video of Luke Richardson playing, he wasn't a calm and cool guy. He was a really tough, rugged, hard-nosed defenseman who played in the NHL at 18 years old with the Toronto Maple Leafs, didn't back down from anybody, would drop the gloves with anybody, would hit anybody. So he's got a lot of respect in the room. And, Jeff Petrie has spoken many times just about how calm Richardson is behind the bench, how he never yells at anybody, and how much that has helped Petrie develop as a defenseman. Just the fact he'll point out a mistake, but, as Petrie said, when you made a mistake more than anybody else when you get back to the bench. You don't need the coach screaming and yelling at you, and Richardson doesn't do that. So perfect guy to fill in. He has 4 years of head coaching experience in the AHL, so it's not like he's never run a bench before. I think the biggest adjustment was bringing in Sean Burke, the director of goaltending, to run the defense. That was something a little bit strange, I guess, but it seems to be doing a good job. They're rotating those top 4 guys in and mixing the number 5 and 6 guys. But unfortunate what happened to Dominic. For everything he's gone through this year, to not be able to be with the team at this point in the Stanley Cup semifinals, it must be killing him. But for Luke Richardson, I'm confident he will be a head coach in the NHL one day. It won't be in Montreal because of the language issue. At least when Luke took over this time, the Canadiens didn't feel they had to apologize for him not speaking French like they did last year when Kirk Muller had to take over from Claude Julien when he was rushed to the hospital. But Luke Richardson has a ton of hockey experience. He's a good man, and he will be a head coach, I think, one day in the NHL. It won't be with the Canadiens, but for now he's getting his first taste of it, and he's doing a good job.
I still think it's funny that amidst all the changes with all the coaching and the way the team has played over the last few years, even with Luke Richardson behind the bench, I've seen fans go out of their way to say, hey, you know what, maybe Luke Richardson should be switched out from the bench and possibly looking for other employment elsewhere. Amidst all of that change, he's still behind the bench, and now he finds himself in a position coaching the Montreal Canadiens 2 wins away from a berth to the Stanley Cup final. Also, in terms of that experience behind a bench, I believe it was in the AHL with the Binghamton Senators, and I believe 2 other guys he coached are also in the series as well, and Robin Lehner and Mark Stone. So pretty interesting that he gets to be on the other side against 2 guys he once coached for. So now let's move on to question number 4, which is a bit more broad. But the Canadiens obviously still being in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We've seen a lot of fans enjoy themselves. We've seen the memes. We saw the guy who said 2,500 fans will feel like 25,000, I swear to God. We've seen the photos of people on terraces distancing themselves, but also a huge flock of people behind them wilding out. It's very clear this city has gotten all the way behind the Montreal Canadiens, so as they should, of course. But also there's life in downtown again. And this is coming after we have all been inside for quite some time because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's coming at a pretty cool time too, with everyone being able to get vaccinations. People are able to move up their appointments for their second doses as well. As the kids would say, nature is healing. right now in Montreal, and it couldn't have come at a better time in coinciding with the Canadiens playoff run. How much fun is it seeing this city come alive during these Stanley Cup playoffs?
I don't think it gets much better. I mean, let's face it, a lot of people didn't figure the Canadiens would get as far as they're going now, and now that they're in this grouping where they have a chance to get into the Stanley Cup final with potential of winning a Stanley Cup, it's quite obvious everybody's going to jump back on the wagon saying, you know what, anything is possible at this point, and they're playing a type of game right now that they have every chance to advance and every chance to possibly win a Stanley Cup. So I think that's got everybody obviously very excited. Everybody's on board, and it's really a special place to see the city of Montreal come and stand behind the players and just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I was talking with my doctor the other day, and he was telling me how good it's been for patients that he's talking with. Just it's something positive after all the negatives that we've all gone through this COVID-19 pandemic. And yeah, it's nice to see the city come back to life. I mean, walking to the Bell Center for the last couple of games, there's not a lot of social distancing going on outside the Bell Center, I can tell you that. A lot of young people that are just having a good time. Hopefully there's no outbreak from it, but it's just people having fun in the city. And, downtown's alive. Before Game 4, I was walking down to the Bell Center. I stopped on a terrace to have a bite to eat before the game, and it was just fun, people watching and overhearing conversations. There was a couple of young Habs fans, maybe around your age, Julie, maybe a little younger, talking with some older fans. And one of the young fans actually asked the older guy, when they used to have the parade, what street did it go down? I stopped eating. I started laughing, but it just shows you, like, this younger generation of fans have no idea what it's like to see the Canadiens not only win a Stanley Cup, but get to a final. They haven't won since '93. They haven't been to a final since '93. So there's a real exuberance and a lot of excitement downtown. Obviously not as much as it would be if there wasn't COVID, but it's nice to see the terraces opening and people having a beer or a bite to eat before the game. It's nice seeing people excited outside the rink before and after the game. And I think it's just good. And I think even before the playoffs, I think just having the Canadiens on TV, especially during the curfew, during COVID, give people something to do at night and something to get excited about and look forward to. And, it was a good year for the Canadiens to go this far because I think the city needed a boost. I think the restaurants obviously needed a boost from what they've gone through being shut down. And just people in general, just people feel good. The city's alive when the Canadiens are playing well, and especially in the playoffs. The weather's nice, summer's here, everything's going well. And if they can get to the Stanley Cup final, I can just imagine what the scenes are going to be like downtown.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a blessing in a way that the season has been pushed because of the nice weather that we have right now during the playoffs. If this was regular times, the Stanley Cup would have been already awarded. But I think just people like becoming Habs fans because of this. A colleague at work of mine, she is not a sports fan at all, but just decided to start cheering for the Habs during the playoffs because it was something to do. It seemed fun. And now she's completely swept away in the Habs mania at the moment. She was like, I didn't realize how stressful it is to be a Habs fan. And I think it's just things like that the people who maybe didn't follow the Habs before are now joining in because they've been seeing how excited Habs fans have been and how much fun it has been to watch the Canadiens do what they've done in the playoffs. They've been the underdogs the whole time. They've been counted out time and time again, and they keep coming back, showing that they can compete. And especially the series against Vegas, everyone was kind of like, okay, this is going to be the reality. When they face Vegas, they will have, no chance against them. They're in a league of their own. And you know what? The Canadiens have been able to keep up with Vegas and possibly put some doubt in their minds. And that's been the nice part. And I think it's been a very pleasant surprise after everything that the city and the world has been having to deal with in the last year and a half.
Well, in this city and this province, there's a lot that divides people, whether it's politics or language or religions or whatever. The one thing that brings everybody together in this city is the Canadiens. And you see it with the people downtown, the age group, the ethnic groups, everybody, English, French. Everybody loves the Canadiens. And, Jess, you're talking about watching an elderly neighbor of mine, a woman in her 80s, was telling me she watched the game the other night. The first period, she had the volume on. The second period, she turned it off because she couldn't handle the stress. And the third, by the time it was overtime, she was leaving, like walking out of the room and walking back in and walking in and out. She just couldn't handle it. But everybody's watching the Canadiens right now. Nothing brings the city together more than the Montreal Canadiens.
And it's amazing. Everybody schedules themselves around, okay, I've got to go and watch the hockey game. And I just remember back when we played the Nordiques, I spoke to a guy from the city and he said, you know what, at a specific time during the, the commercial breaks, the water in the reservoirs went down significantly lower because of the little bathroom breaks. And I thought he was kidding, but he was serious because nobody was out wandering around other than watching the games and then taking their little breaks all at the same time. So it's a great thing to see, and I love to see the people into it like they're into, and they deserve it.
Well, I'm really happy for the younger generation of Habs fans to get to experience this. I was spoiled growing up watching guys like Rick Green win the Stanley Cup. When I was in high school, the Canadiens won the Cup 4 out of the 5 years I was in high school. And it was like an annual event where you skipped school to go to the parade. And I might have told this story in a previous show, but I asked my buddies who were going to the parade one year, and I said to one of my buddies, are you going to come? He said, no. I said, I'll go next year. And he did. He went the next year. So that's what it was like for me growing up in Montreal with the Canadiens. And then you have this whole other, generation or 2 generations of Canadiens fans who have never witnessed or experienced this, which leads to the kid on the terrace asking, what street did the parade used to go on when it used to just be the usual route? The parade will take the usual route. So I'm happy that a younger generation of Canadiens fans are getting to experience this.
Here's something else I want to bring up as well. And maybe it's going to sound selfish coming from me, but I imagine Jess is probably thinking this too. And I bet, Stu, you're thinking this too. I'm happy to see the Canadiens do well because I want to say I've covered a Stanley Cup final. Like, I've thought about this, like, for the last how many days, about the possibility of covering a team that is in a Stanley Cup final. I don't know how many times that's happened for you, Stu, as a reporter. I know you've gotten to watch that as a fan or just someone living in the city, but since you've been working at the Gazette, how many times has that happened for you where you got to, be around the Canadiens as a reporter?
Yeah, well, I've been in this business long, but I don't root for a team. Like, if the Canadiens win,
I'm not saying like rooting or anything, more just like covering the team.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's more fun covering a team when they're winning. That's obvious.
Yes.
Players are more willing to talk. They're more happy to see you. They're more, so it's more fun covering a team that's winning. And it's good for the city. As I wrote the column when I did my prediction before this series started, I picked Vegas in 6, and I said, I hope I'm wrong. Like, my watching, like, my hockey knowledge or everything about these teams leads me to believe Vegas was going to win the series. But I hope the Canadiens win for this. And I mentioned all the reasons for the city because of what we were talking about before, because COVID, I think this city needs a jolt, and it's good for Montreal. It's good for our business. It's good for a lot of people when the Canadiens are doing well. So I'd love to see the Canadiens win this series. I'd love to see them go on and win the Stanley Cup. If they win, fantastic. If they lose, I'm not going to cry about it or be upset about it. But as I said, I'm just happy that this is happening to the city, and especially for a younger Canadiens fan base that has never experienced this.
Yeah, but
Julian,
but Julian, just think, because everything's on Zoom, there's no locker room access. Say if the Montreal Canadiens were to win, you wouldn't get to experience walking into that locker room afterwards.
And I wouldn't get to use these either.
Yeah. No, exactly.
For the champagne, right? Yeah. Like, that'd be cool. But like, in all seriousness, like, yes, of course, like, as reporters, we're objective in our jobs. But I think for people like me who especially have not seen the Canadiens be as successful as what they were like in the 80s and the 70s and the previous decades, to even just say, that they were able to even be on Zoom calls for a team that is in the Stanley Cup final, I think for myself anyway, like, I'm pretty excited about that. And Jess, I don't know if you share that same sentiment as well.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's just that part of it, of getting to witness it, getting champagne thrown on you if they were to win it. And I remember back in 2017 when they made it this far, there was seeing everyone come in to cover this team, and it felt so much bigger. That aspect of it is missing because we're not all together in a press conference room. Everything's being done electronically now, unfortunately.
Yeah, the one thing. Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
So no, I'm just going to say, from a player standpoint, I'm telling you, when you have that sense and feeling that you have an opportunity to get to a Stanley Cup final and win a Stanley Cup, which is your life dream as a kid growing up, and then even more important for me, at least growing up, born in Ontario, but for me, my dream was to win a Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens. And I tell you what, it doesn't get much better.
Man, now you got us all thinking about the Stanley Cup. The Canadiens, as of this video, still 2 wins away from reaching the Stanley Cup final. At this point, who knows? Any quick predictions for Game 5? Scores? Who's going to win? Any quick ones?
4-3 Habs.
4-3 Habs?
I'm gonna go. Sorry, with Vegas at a 4-2 win.
Okay.
I think Vegas is going to be hard to beat with those fans. I'm going to say maybe 3-1 Vegas, but it's going to be hard for Vegas to win when they come back to Montreal for Game 6. We got a series, I picked Vegas in 6 before the start of the series. Right now, I see this series going 7 games, and Game 7, anything can happen. Vegas would obviously have the advantage of being at home, but Game 7, how much fun would that be?
Game 7 is going to be fun if it gets to that point. Game 6 in Montreal on Saint Jean-Baptiste Day is also going to be fun. I say Canadiens win Game 5 by a score of 2-1, and that's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you again for subscribing to our show and helping us reach that 10,000 subscriber mark. Let us know in the comments section just how you've been feeling about this playoff run and how excited you might be feeling. And if you have any questions you'd like to see any of us tackle in a future episode, be sure to write down that question in the comment section below, and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out all of our full episodes, all of our fun stuff, all the About Last Night columns as well, and anything else Brendan Kelly wants to write as well. So much good stuff on hockeyinsideout.com. Be sure to check it out.